We dreamed of this conference before the pandemic struck, and we've waited ages to lay it on because of the pressures that schools and parishes have been under. But we think this is the right time to do this today, and so we're really glad that you joined us. I think we bring different understandings of school to the table. At either end, these can lull us into a complacent assumption that we know how they function and how to navigate them because we are or have been a parent of school-aged children. Or they can intimidate us and make us self-conscious because past personal experiences get in the way. For every single adult, there is a trigger warning when they cross a school premise in relation to their past experience. But in between these two poles, I think, lie many people who feel very warmly towards local schools, but don't really think it's their business to get involved in any way. Parish churches are more familiar with Church of England schools, but even here, there can be either trepidation or uncertainty over how to engage with them, or complacency sometimes that it's just an extension of church to dip in and out of as we choose. But when it comes to community schools, that is non-church schools, these issues are usually magnified. Preconceptions may have to be broken down on both sides. The school may be wary of the local church because they don't know anyone there, and the senior leadership team may have no links with churches themselves. This may make them initially more suspicious than trusting. On the other side, church leaders can be self-conscious, anxious not to look shifty and opportunistic. The reality can be, and usually is, so different. Community schools are often very welcoming of the involvement of a local church, especially where relationships have been warmly nurtured over time. They want to be well connected to other local bodies because it enriches the experience of their students and makes for a more resilient learning environment. And church leaders, once established, are often trusted with lots of things, giving some community schools more of a church school feel in practice. Today's webinar is meant to help church leaders and those with any interest or stake in schools understand community schools better, how they tick and what they need. It's about overcoming awkwardness and self-consciousness, finding confidence and seeing new ways in which to serve schools. The foundations of every good relationship are trust, kindness, service, and sincerity. That takes time, but it doesn't require an astonishing skill set. Simply some emotional intelligence that puts other people at ease and helps them to understand that you are being loyal and supportive to them. So I hope at the end of our time today that people may find renewed confidence and encouragement and be inspired afresh in their ministry to the schools that shape the identity of the local communities that we are here to serve. So I'm delighted for our first speaker today that we have Mike Harrowing, who is CEO of Spinnaker Trust. I think he's a very busy man and probably tell us the 12 other things he has in his portfolio too if he wants to. But Mike is going to talk to us on reaching into the heart of the community, and we're really grateful for his time here this afternoon. Just before I hand over to him, the usual sort of rules apply. You may well have questions that you want to put or things you want to say, just put them into the chat function. Or indeed, towards the end of our session today, there will be space for questions. So there'll be an opportunity for people to raise hands informally, and we'll seek to deal with them then. So thank you very much indeed. If you could stay on mute when you're not speaking from this point, that would be great. And we look forward to hearing what Mike has to say to us. Thank you very much, Mike.
Thanks, Simon. I feel like you sort of roundly summarised everything I'm about to say, so you are welcome to just sort of switch off and fall asleep now. Yeah, my name is Mike Harrowing. I wear two hats professionally. I am a schools worker myself, 18 years now in West Kent, working with about 30 schools of all conceivable kinds. Over lockdown, I switched to videos, much like most of you, I imagine, and I developed a program called Bubble Worship because children were in their bubbles. You can find these videos on YouTube. It's High Hopes Kids on YouTube there. The angle I developed for these was very much one of trying to make easy resources for teachers to be confident using with their 30 odd kids, whether they themselves had a faith or not, or indeed sort of parents at home. And that sense of easy access to faith ideas for faithless people has been a strong theme for me the past couple of years. And I think it will hopefully come through over the next sort of 15-20 minutes. Right now, in that line of things, I'm trying to just get the right balance for pace and getting back to regular visits. With my other hat, which is actually sort of my bigger main hat, I am, as Simon mentioned, the CEO of Spinnaker. Spinnaker is a brilliant schools outreach charity, a collective. But rather than work with the kids, I just get to boss people about there. Spinnaker has worked for, is our 35th year this year, working with local churches in central London and greater London, across the southeast and down towards the coast, including in Rochester Diocese. And we've been reaching out to primary schools all that time with the local church from all sorts of denominations. Spinnaker does provide free open resources, training and support for school visitors. You are very welcome to make use of everything that we can offer you. And our website is Spinnaker, www.spinnaker.org.uk. If you're Googling it, you might just find yourself on some sort of sailing website. Don't worry about that. Just add the word schools and you'll find us. More personally, I like to review board games and I do discos. I like to have a little boogie. I live with my wife and 2 children. She is very kindly taking them out of the house for the evening. I don't know if they are very happy about that at that precise moment. But my own children at the beginning of their school lives, I've got one who's at nursery a year off and another one in year 2. I'm actually now getting to experience schools from a whole new perspective. That is to say that I've spent sort of more time by the lost property bucket in the last 2 months than I have the entire 2 decades previous. And yeah, I'm really pleased to be able to contribute something of my experience to this webinar. I would love for you to feel the exceptional importance of working with schools, in particular, have a stronger sense of the partnership that you already have with your local community school. And I'm going to use that word community as a very lazy catch-all term for any primary that isn't C of E affiliated. I would also absolutely love it if you were really frustrated that it'll be the end of the school day when I finish rather than the beginning. So your fresh ideas that you think of are going to have to wait at least 16 hours before you can kick them off. I love collective worship. I love assembly. The A and the S keys on my keyboard of my laptop have entirely rubbed out, completely illegible, because my diary for years has entirely been filled with the word ass. I love assemblies, not just because of the immature daily giggles that gives me, but because assemblies are utterly unique in a human's life. At no other time do those children have an opportunity to join with hundreds of others from wildly differing households to share and grow and celebrate the truths found in the Bible and the revelation of the Spirit and the discovery of this world and who they are. It is in these sort of 15, 18-minute wonders that children become existentially literate. I love lessons. More even than in Sunday school, you can lead theologically rich and engaging study, equipping children with the tools to intellectually and emotively test and taste the biblical text and the tenets of church history core concepts, mind-blowing events, and world-shattering ideas, all set in this brilliant framework of broader education, where the Christian faith is enabled to prove its robust relevance socially, globally, and deeply, deeply personally. Lessons where the children can learn the depths of their own humanity and validate their worth and their experience. I love clubs, safe spaces where we unwind over a snack and a drink to provide a place for our children to blow off the pressures of the day or regroup before heading home. The opportunity to provide parents with that extra hour of prep or work, or maybe even a bit of rest before their little darlings come home. In my case, in Tunbridge, none of our club children in any of our schools had ever been to church, and seeing their joy at the feeding of the 5,000, or their incredulous disbelief at the reaction of the prodigal son's father, or witnessing their morbid delight at Solomon's baby wisdom. It's priceless stuff. I love chaplaincy, being a fresh air, not just to the children, but to the staff as well, a befriending ministry of presence that is meaningful, connected, reliable, empathetic, dependable, and uplifting, sharing in the highs and the lows of personal and professional lives, transcending more than just a mere discourse, but towards a transformative, releasing and stabilizing reality for ordinary people. Teachers are just ordinary people who are just trying to do their best job and care in an often relentless environment. I just love primary schools. I started primary school 35 years ago. I'm going to turn 40 soon. And apart from a brief foray into engineering, which I can tell you did not end well, although nobody sort of crashed a train or anything, I've always had a hand in schools. And I mention this because I'm hoping to add some weight to my opinion, which is there has never been a better time for schools work. And I mean that starting literally 8 or 9 weeks ago. It has never been better. And we are entering a golden time in schools ministry. Lockdown has thrown into really stark relief how very important whole health and coming together is. And Christians can step up to support schools in fostering environments that provide those things. Last year, almost every school in the country subscribed to the recovery curriculum, a framework for helping children affected by the disturbances that came from COVID. The sheer number of schools that signed up to that was an incredible feat of synergy and screamed, "We want good news!" For me, the word recovery in recovery curriculum is just a step away from renewal. It's just a step away from redemption, a step away from restoration. These schools, so many of them, thousands, have been crying out for what is literally the gospel. And you and I have the skills and the talent to communicate generously, sensitively, openly, and sincerely. A common mistake this is a common mistake, sorry, but C of E, I'm just reading the word coffee here, it's just going straight to my head. C of E schools are not faith schools, that's what I'm trying to say. They are not set up for the furtherment of Christian religion. They were and are set up so that every child has an access to education. Because education was the path to welfare. Their spiritual lives were catered for by the church and the community. And education was a channel of their salvation. Since that original vision, 150 years ago, the tables have turned. The state has picked up education, the influence of church and agreed social morals has declined, and the spiritual welfare of children has taken a dive. We've known this for years, but lockdown has been the kick that was needed to publicly recognize it and unashamedly proclaim we need recovery. I'm not knocking education at all. It is a well-established route out of poverty, but there is a vacuum where there should be a scaffold for moral and self-development. Get sucked in and start building that much needed channel of salvation. We all know the figure, right? I've no doubt you've all heard it. Scripture Union have calculated that 95% of children have no direct, regular connection with the church. Meanwhile, of course, all of them nearly are in school. So obviously, if you want to affect the spiritual life of children, it's got to be through schools. Let's consider that even further though. The C of E only make up 25% of schools. So that's still 75% of kids with no connection to their local church. Imagine any 4 children right now, do it. Imagine 4 of them. 3 of those kids have no connection, completely cut off. And that's not even factoring in the tendency for C of E schools to be numerically smaller in size and out there in the sticks and rural villages. For me, that is a big neon signpost saying, obviously, community schools matter. But even if numbers aren't your thing, there are still great places to go because of the people that you meet there and the lives that you encounter. On my first official day as chaplain at one of the local 3-form entry junior schools, I met a year 6 lad. We'll call him Dave. Let's call him Harry. Harry's a good name, isn't it? I met him by the Sainsbury's voucher collection box. And I said to him, "Hey, Harry, how was your Easter?" "Great," he said. "I found a body." "Ooh, like a badger or a rabbit, maybe a deer?" "It was a homeless person," said the Harry. "He died on a barn in our farm." That was not the direction that I was expecting my first ever conversation as community chaplain to take. "Right," I said. I became quite inarticulate at this point, but he didn't really mind. He just filled in the gaps for me. "The police have confiscated my phone," he said, "and my teacher said I'm not allowed to talk to the other children about it." He was very disappointed. Harry did not care who I was. He had a life story to share, and I was simply available to listen. He was looking for a channel to unpack what was going on. On the surface, he was fine. Hopefully long term, he was fine. But he had had a liminal encounter, and he needed a connection to process it. "Were you a bit scared?" I asked him. "Nah," he answered. "I played loads of Call of Duty." On a different day, in a different school, I found out why Chelsea came to our fun club. It was because her brother had extensive developmental and behavioural difficulties, and her single mum was absolutely tearing her hair out trying to look after them. Our club was one of the few places in her life that she got to have some quiet time. In a different school again, Marcus didn't win the game we were playing, and he absolutely lost his rag. Like full on screaming for 5+ minutes, just horrendous noise, scary stuff. When I got help from a member of staff, I discovered that this was a common thing for Marcus, but that the school had no plan or process or anything in place to help him manage his behavior. So we did that at our club. We chatted with his teacher. We went in early. We spoke to him and set expectations, and we did anything and everything else that we could think of. And painstakingly, over 18 months, Marcus blossomed into the intelligent, totally charming and inspiring kid he always was. I don't think that I dealt with most of those situations at all well. But if nothing else, it served to remind me that normal, mundane life is tumultuous. And I believe very strongly that every child should have access to the Christian scaffold, because all children will develop their own assessment of their self-worth, with or without us. They will all develop their eschatological theories, with or without us. I want Christ on the table as a good option for the keystone of their lives. I know, of course, that these issues and difficulties rise up in every environment. It's humanity, isn't it? But every one of those children I've just mentioned, and many, many others, went to community schools. Community schools are where it's at. It's always been a point of integrity for me that anything I say or do in a C of E school, I also do and say in a community school, and vice versa. Because frankly, the mix of households of where those children are coming from isn't greatly different. And this approach has often surprised some of my older Christian supporters. But of course, they say, that's my old person voice, but of course, you can't say such and such in a non-faith school. And whilst in ways that is true, it belies the power shift that the church wider has had to come to terms with over the decade. We live, we know it, in a post-Christendom world. The cultural power of the church is diminished. And what with them being full of vulnerable young people, community schools are at the sharp end of post-Christendom. It is an exciting place to be. It does throw up some additional hurdles to overcome. There's a great line from Spider-Man, isn't there? Great power comes great responsibility, but the reverse is true too. With great responsibility comes great power. And in a community school, your responsibility is greatly changed. And with it, your power is changed too. And you do have power. It's not a question of what you can't say. It's a challenge about what you can say and an invitation to find more creative ways of saying it. Hint, the arts are your friends. You have power to offer to community schools, and they desperately want your energy. When Jesus was born, it wasn't in a palace, was it? And when he ministered, it wasn't in Rome. He was born in a backwater and ministered on the outskirts. I know you know this, but it's true. He did not put himself at the center. And he did not exercise executive power. He brought the kingdom of God relevantly and into really mundane situations to mingled crowds of friendly and unfriendly factions. By his spirit, you have that same power to work on the edge and lift the community. In community schools, our responsibility isn't big or complex. In a way, it's simple: to be present. On a very pragmatic level, it's just make the head's life easier by doing a good job. Because bottom line, the head teacher is the responsible one, and they need their allies. That is you. One of the obvious and common ways that we do this is through the governors or some similar function. This is a great place to work because not only can you do much of the heavy lifting for the head, but you are able to work at that level where they are required to be, often a lonely and difficult place. But if you stop there, I believe you are missing out on the biggest slice of the cake, the tastiest bit, which is working with the kids and working with the other stakeholders. Last night, my daughter, she's 6, she went to sleep singing, I'm just going to do an impression of her voice. You came from heaven to earth, to na 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 na. She'd forgotten the rest of the words. She only knew that first line. But despite her lack of lyrical knowledge, my heart was lifted up. I absolutely loved hearing that. I loved her hearing that song, but it was a great big surprise because I have not taught her that song. She has not heard it at home. And we don't sing that at church. I come from a new wine church and we've moved on to whatever the latest album is. She heard that song at school. My daughter does attend our local C of E, and last night reminded me of one of the reasons why I sent her to a C of E. Because she's growing in a culture that celebrates God, celebrates what matters to me, and it was good to know that school is on my team. By that same token though, I imagine there were people last night listening to their children softly singing in bed, thinking to themselves, oh, I'm glad that they're not singing one of those Christian songs. I'm glad I sent them to our local community school to avoid all that religious stuff. Well, perhaps nobody was actually thinking that, but there are parents who are legitimately concerned about a church influence in their child's life because of their experience or their thought process or where they are in life. And of course, those parents are responsible for their child's welfare. It can be easy to fear a fight or a revolt from parents, especially for the head. But in the overwhelming majority of situations, you and parent X or parent millennial, you are allies. Most parents just want the best for their kids and they want their values upheld, but you are a key player in making that happen. Working together to raise a child to be who they are. Last month, I was helping put together an RE day for Hayley, a different school. Hayley had fretted and sweated and pulled out all the stops to make this day a massive success. This day was one of the 2 RE days that they have each year, during which they have to cover 4, 5 major religions. Yes, the RE coordinator has to comprehensively teach 5 major faiths in the 10 hours a year that she is given. It'll come as no surprise to some of you that when the day came around, it turned out that there'd been a diary misunderstanding, which meant that also the school photographer was in, wiping out the main room and utterly destroying the daily timetable. In amongst that, we still had to squeeze in everything that we planned. When Hayley introduced me in assembly that morning, she asked the children, or she said, hello, it's RE Day. Hey children, what do you think RE Day stand for? And a year 5 child raised his hand and said, is it when we have our photo taken, miss? Before Hayley had a chance to burst into tears, which I assumed she might given the amount of work that she put in, I stepped in and I said, yes, that is what RE days are for. RE is the time when you take an image of yourself. Take a good look at yourself and say, this is who I am. This is me. This is what I am all about. It's the day when you can look at your friends and say, oh, that's who you are. It's the day when we can see how we are different and similar and consider how we can all live well together. That is RE Day, because Christians believe that each and every one of us is a photo of God himself, made in his image, ... So I went on. My role at that point and every point was to be an ally to Hayley. Your role is to be an ally to your RE coordinator. They just want to do their job well, whether they're a Christian or not. And you are the key to their success. You have a different power in community schools. You have the power to ally yourself with staff. You have the power to light children's lives. You have the power to help children recover. You have the power to soothe and settle. You have the power to provide expertise and unique skills. You have the power to raise your school to the level of outstanding and beyond. You have the power to influence and positively change 100 children's lives. You can put into these children's lives, and from the outside, there may be no visible change, but we know it's there. It is in the moments of our visits that seeds are sown, that feet are planted on firm foundations, that lives of knowing God's works in head and heart are dawned. When I started out with schools work 18 years ago, I used to hope that I'd make a difference. I don't hope that anymore. I used to trust that I've made some kind of difference. I don't trust that anymore. I know we make a difference, because you cannot hear God's word, encounter God's spirit, catch a glimpse of heaven, and not have your path positively, joyfully, reassuringly changed for the good. I pray that you have a fantastic time in your community school, and that your school has an even more fantastic time from your visits. Thank you for letting me share with you today. And at the very least, my email is always open if you want to chat more about this most wonderful of doorstep missions. It's mike@spinnaker.org.uk. I'm going to hand back to Simon or whoever's next after me, but I really appreciate being able to blab away at you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mike. You've been burning off the calories standing up there while we're all sedentary eating biscuits. It's been great to hear from you. Thank you. Very lively and energetic contribution. Maybe if you could just put your email address into the chat function as well, so people have got it, because I'm quite sure there will be people who want to engage with you in future. But thank you for that. And to all who are listening, if we have questions for Mike, do save those up, and we can share those later on in the event. And as I said, we will be finished by 5 o'clock. So I'm going to hand over now to our next two speakers, who are Karen Joy, who is head teacher of Abbey Court School in Strood, who's now waving at us there, I see, and Nicholas Cooper, who's the vicar of Finsbury with Upnor and Chattendown in Strood Deanery. And they're going to talk about how they've worked together in partnership as community school and church, and doubtless through the the experiences that they've had, there are going to be principles and ideas that the rest of us can draw upon. And we're really grateful to both of them for joining us today, and I'm going to hand over to them. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks very much, Bishop Simon. Well, we're sitting in Abbey Court School, one of the community schools in the parish, but 5 years ago that wouldn't have been possible because it wasn't here. But we did have a relationship with the school through two chaplains, the Reverend Sue Valenti-Kerr and a lay chaplain, Anne Maladay. But the school was not physically in this parish, and so they travelled to exercise their ministry with Abbey Court. I arrived on the scene as the vicar and inherited a great blessing, both in the lay chaplain's existing relationship with the school and with the prospect of the school moving into the parish physically. Now, you may be aware that Abbey Court is a school whose pupils have severe learning difficulties, profound and multiple learning difficulties. Educational needs here are commonly visual and hearing impairment and sensory impairment, autism and other forms of physical disability. Karen, I know, was concerned about moving into this new parish, what she might find from the local community. And she's going to be reflecting on that a little bit later. I, from a personal point of view, however, have to say that I was so very, very excited when I learned that Abbey Court was going to be moving here. Because my own brother spent his childhood years in a hospital, and I quote, for the mentally and physically handicapped. Thankfully, attitudes and provisions have changed. The truth is that we are, as Mike said, all created in the image of God. We're all loved by him, and therefore we are all infinitely valued by him. We're of infinite value to him and of value to each other. So we want to give you an insight into the school through this edited version of the school's own video, which I'm sure you'll enjoy. That looks more hopeful.
We say hello to each other when we come into school and look forward to our day. We help each other to get to class. In class, everyone enjoys lessons such as maths and music, where we all join in. Everyone has an opportunity to ride Tonto and to learn about how to take care of animals, making choices and using our own communication aids. Beach. We love swimming in the hydro pool. We learn water confidence. Some of us work with different adults to help us with skills like reading, signing, and working outside of the classroom.
That is lots of letters that you know.
Yeah.
Excellent. You can put that one up there as well.
Yeah. We use the outdoor areas to learn as well as the sensory room. Abbey Court. It is a big goal.
Thank you. I would like to go into school.
We help our friends by setting up the hall for lunch. It encourages us to work as a team and to task. We are encouraged to love reading and using our imaginations to be creative. We use functional skills every day in school to cook and take part in life learning activities that will help us when we leave school. At the secondary, we do lots of learning off-site. We complete work experience activities in school to develop our work ethic and confidence.
Well, hi everybody, and I'm Karen, and I have the privilege of being the head teacher at Abbey Court, and I've been there 27 years. I've been at Abbey Court 27 years, and it's been an incredible journey. Unfortunately, it took a long time for us to get the current provision, which is a purpose-built provision for disabled children. And for many years, we lived in what was an ex-infant school building, infant junior school building in Parkwood in Rainham, and it wasn't suitable. And eventually the governing body managed to persuade the council that they wanted to build us a brand new building, which is where Nicholas and I are sitting now, which is completely the other side of Medway, some 12 miles away from our original site. And it was brilliant that we'd got a new school, and it cost about £12 million, and it was all singing and dancing and had every facility for the children. But it was a bittersweet time for us because it meant that we had to move. And anybody, all of you will have moved house, and you know very much how stressful a time that is to move. I tell you, when you move a school of 158 staff and nearly 200 very complex children, it is one incredible mammoth effort. I remember seeing the almost 24 Pickford's Pantechnicons parked outside the school on the day of the move and thought they've got to be filled with children's equipment and moved to a new school, and it was an incredibly daunting time. It was bittersweet for us really, because we'd established ourselves within the local Rainham community with the help of the church, and we've got many friends. So it was bittersweet in that we wanted to come to the new building, but we also felt an incredible sense of loss. And we lost really a sense of security because we were moving somewhere that was very unknown. Often people open new schools, but it's quite rare when you actually pick up a school and move it. And a school like ours is a school that's often very misunderstood. Although we might bandy about the word special school, often people don't know what that means in reality in terms of the type of child that is within it. So when we moved to the new community, people were quite fearful of us because they couldn't really identify with us or the type of child that might be local to them. If you say primary school, everybody knows what that means. Everybody knows what a primary child looks like. But people didn't really know what our children looked like and how they would be. And there was a lot of fear and insecurity within the local community about who we were and how we would be and what it would mean for them. Were our children going to run around with knives in the streets at the end of the school day? Were our children mentally unstable and going to frighten their children? There was an awful lot of fear about. And so it was important to me to look to the church to help facilitate, if you like, our rite of passage and for us to take our place within our new community. As I said, we'd established a lot of links with the church. We had two wonderful chaplains who were there to support the staff. The staff refer to our chaplains as big guns. When the chaplains come in, often the staff will turn around and say, oh, they've got the big guns out today, and that's how they view them. And we needed the church to actually get us understood, if you like, and that was really important. Sadly, we're not a church school. Because we're a special school, we are unable to be a church school, but we had been affiliated, we remain affiliated to the diocese, and we hope that we are a valuable part of it. We are a school with a very strong church ethos, even though we're not a church school. And so what we were wanting to do was work with Nicholas and other people within the parish and the community to try and break down the fear about what it might mean for locals with regard to having a load of children with very, very complex needs. Our school's different, and people find difference very difficult. Our school is unknown, and people find that very, very difficult. So what we were trying to do was find an anchor within all of this instability and insecurity, and Nicholas helped us find that anchor and helped us find our rightful place. They have helped us become understood, and they have helped us become accepted, and they have helped us grow. Our mantra for our school is "We grow people." And what we needed to do was put down our roots in our new community and grow. And I think even though we've been here a relatively short amount of time, we've absolutely done that. And I hope Nicholas now is going to illustrate that with some of the projects and ideas and activities that we planned and put into place in order that we could put down our roots and establish ourselves in the way that I believe we have. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. I think our first formal welcome of Abbey Court to the parish was to a church Christingle service in Upnor in 2017. It was quite a logistical challenge. You see the logoed Abbey Court buses driving around the parish, and actually as they deliver the children to church services both here and at Upnor, actually that's visible and the name is seen. So that's great. And whilst Upnor is not a particularly warm or light church, it provided a really atmospheric first Christingle for us as we swung battery-powered Christmas lights around to try and illustrate the light of Jesus coming into the world. And then they joined us at All Saints for our Nativity Festival, which has been run for many years before I arrived here. And they got to meet more of the church family, in particular, Derek, or Del. Del's now a retired licensed evangelist, and he's one of our current church wardens. And until last year, he was a scout leader with the church-sponsored 27th All Saints Scouts. And at the time, Bear Grylls, the chief scout, was promoting scouting for all. And Del took note and began inquiring about what scouting provision there was for children with disabilities. There seemed to be nothing, but that wasn't going to deter Del because there was a need. And so the seeds were sown for the formation of the Abbey Court Scout Group. And then in 2019, Education Sunday and Ability Sunday coincided. And at different times in the past as a parish, we've observed those days as a focus for those needs, for our teaching and for our prayers. But it just seemed too good an opportunity to miss. And so I approached Karen with an idea to relocate our Sunday main service from All Saints to Abbey Court. It was led by Sue and Anne, and Bishop Simon came and spoke for us. And apart obviously from the church family and the families of the school, we invited folk from the community to join us too. And actually, there's nothing particularly new or novel in that. I was looking at one of our old church magazines, and there was a family service at another community school, and that was back in the 1960s. So there is nothing new under the sun. But it was a fantastic occasion, and the service culminated in the investiture of the first Abbey Court Scouts. And afterwards, I was talking to a family, and a visitor with that family, who was a teacher in a similar school, said, "I wonder if there would ever be a job going here." Well, this school, as you see, has a farm, and that's captured much local interest. You may have seen their Swift project on TV, and with over 1% of the Nightingales in Chattendene plus Swifts, this parish is carrying its weight ornithologically. And a member of our congregation, Dolly, now 102, celebrated her 100th birthday requesting that all the monies that might be spent on presents for her go to the school farm. Dolly, pre-COVID, was a drop-in at our drop-in cafes, and they provided a wonderful work experience opportunity for the older students here. And they would come and join us, serving tea and coffee and washing up. And their company was enjoyed by everyone in the community. There have been real blessings, I think, for both sides in this relationship. Dell, having retired as a scout leader, is now a trustee of Abbey Court School. And Jess, who wondered if there were any jobs going, well, COVID stopped her going back to Australia, and she's now a teacher at the school. The farm has 2 donkeys, Bobby and Paddy, who are in theological training for work at Christmas and carols with the animals, and also for Palm Sunday. And in looking through my emails as we prepared this, I found one from Karen, which said, after Education Sunday, that was great, we must do it again. They do say never work with children and animals, which leaves me with the question, why not? Because it's been a blast.
Thank you very much indeed, Karen and Nicholas. Really appreciate that. I mean, it's a great double act that you've got going there of a remarkable school, and just to hear how the relationship grew with the local parish church has been very encouraging. Love the video as well, actually, too. I just wonder if when you've got a moment now, maybe if you could just, if you're happy to, put your email addresses into the chat function, because there may well be pickup, not just here, but actually subsequently if people want to contact you about something, it sparks something in their own thinking, or there might be some kind of relationship that develops. So if that's okay, I'll leave you to do that. And also for those who are listening, you may well have questions as we draw to a close. But I'm going to hand over to our third segment and final segment of speakers this afternoon. Got 2 vicars, Tim Hatwell, who is the rector of St Peter's Ightham, and Wil North, who is the rector of St Margaret's Barming, who've both been actively involved in their local community schools and are going to tell you their stories now. So I'm going to hand over, I think, to, oh no, they're not giving me any clues as to who's going to go first. You're going first because you laughed, Will.
Typical. Thank you, Bishop Simon. I've had the privilege of being involved in community schools as a youth worker in a previous incarnation, and now as a rector, and I can see the differences in both those relationships. Mainly today, I just want to speak about my experience in my kind of current parish. I think the first thing we need to acknowledge with any schools work is to recognise our own context and our own giftings. Mike was absolutely inspirational earlier on with his energy, and yet I know some people might have been looking at that thinking, oh, that's a bit daunting, I could never be like Mike Harrowing. The thing is, we don't need to be another Mike Harrowing, we just need to be the people that God has called us to be, and to use the gifts we've got. And I think, as we've just seen with Nicholas and Karen, it's important to recognise the school we're working with and the context, and to recognise those needs are different. For me personally, schools work is very incarnational. It's about me being that Christ-like figure within the school to both the staff, the teachers, and the students, in whatever shape or form that must take. I think for me, the big difference between when I was a youth worker and being a parish priest is the collar seems to open doors that maybe for youth workers and for laity aren't opened. When I was a youth worker, I was allowed in to do assemblies and to do children's groups and to help with before school clubs and after schools clubs. It didn't actually give me much access to the staff. Since being a priest, I've noticed a change in my role, and I seem to have a greater ministry to the staff in the school than I do with students. But maybe that's just a sign of how I've changed and grown throughout the years. I think the important thing is when we have a community school in our parish is to look for those opportunities. And I think it's always easier to do that when you are new to a parish or context, because you can go in and plead ignorance. So one of the first things I did when I moved to my current parish was look to have a meeting with the head teacher to find out what had gone on before with that school and what the school would like from us as a church. Obviously, if you've been enrolled for a while, you need to maybe find another way of opening up that conversation. And maybe the inroad in that case is actually up in praying, and I think we should be working together. Can we discuss how we may do that? My context is I'm lucky I only have one school. It's a primary school, 2-form entry. So it means I'm not spreading myself too thinly. Within that school, though, we serve it in numerous ways. One of the ways I serve is as chair of governors. It was a role I always wanted to avoid. I was happy to be a governor. Chair of governors I found a little bit daunting, mainly because I don't have an educational background. Interesting enough, the reason I fell into the role of chair of governors is that in a Ofsted window, the previous chair walked away from the school. She was overwhelmed by the prospect of taking a school through Ofsted. And actually, out of my relationship with the school and the senior leadership, the head teacher came to me and said, we've got a problem. We need a chair of governors, or we cannot be a good school. We will fail on leadership. Would you be prepared to lead us through this period? And it was actually a sign of the relationship that I'd built with the head, that he'd recognised in me leadership skills, but it was also a sign of, I think, the trust that he felt we had. And indeed, I did take on that role. 4 years later, I'm still chair of governors, and working with the current head, we've taken a school from special measures to being a good school. And it's been a privilege to journey with the senior leadership and the school on that way. Other areas where we support our school, obviously we do a lot of pastoral support. In particular, I give pastoral support to the head and to the family liaison officer, but we are also there for the staff. And tragically in our school, we've had to help that school journey through the pain of bereavement of both staff and pupils. And once again, it's a privilege to be able to journey with a school in those contexts. Mike spoke about his love for collective worship, and I have to agree with him. Collective worship is a pleasure. There's not many of us in this room can say we can regularly have a congregation of over 400 people, and yet that is what I get every time I stand up to do collective worship. Not only do I get a congregation of 400 people, it's actually 400 people who want to engage with me, want to put their hands up, want to be involved, rather than the glazed look you often get on a Sunday morning. And I think when working with collective worship, one of my big goals is just to challenge a concept that I think kids are going to come across later in life, where people tell them that the vicar or the school or church was boring. Because what I want them to be able to do in later life is go, that was not my experience when I was at primary school. The vicar, the church were engaging, they were informative, they were fun. And one of the ways I bring that into our collective worship is I quite like to get the teachers involved and have a bit of banter with them, because the children really feed off of that relationship and that excitement. But that's, once again, working to who I am as a person. Other ways we support our school. I have regular coffee meetings with our head teacher. I've learned over the years that being a head is very similar to being a vicar. You're at the head of an organisation. Quite often you can feel lonely and isolated and have a limited budget. And actually to have somebody outside of your immediate context to share with, and actually in our case to pray with, I do pray with our head teacher, I've discovered they find invaluable. What I have noticed in our school, and it's a relationship that's been built, in the past I'd hear about things in the school and I'd say to our head, oh, I'm going to go away and pray about that. We're now in the situation where when my head hears about things in his school, he phones me up and says, can you and your church pray about this for us? So they're already beginning to recognise the power of prayer in the school. And I think Bishop Simon said this at the beginning. I think after Bishop Simon spoke, I almost turned off the screen because I think he encapsulated everything in his opening address. But I think the essence of working with a community school is that relationship. There is that trust, as Bishop Simon said. There is that kindness and that sense of service. What can we offer you? And there is a reciprocated nature about that, because what I've noticed is we've served the school, then they've looked to give back to us. One example of where they've given back to us, when it was lockdown and COVID, the school were posting our church's sermons on their website because they were recognising they wanted their families to have a spiritual input. So they came to us and said, can we please put your sermons on the website? I've also noticed our school gives us an inroad to some of the more needy people in our families. So throughout, once again, through COVID and lockdown, we knew there were families in our parish in need of food parcels, but they would not come to us as a church. There was a pride thing. I was able to go to our head and go, I know that you know who these families are. How about if I bring some food parcels up to the school? Could your family liaison officer then pass it on, and these families save face in our community? And as a result, we regularly were taking 15 food parcels at a time up to the school. So we know there's 15 families that needed that support, and the school were able to facilitate that help. Last Christmas, we did the same with Christmas presents. We managed to collect Christmas presents for the community and made sure they got to the most needed families in our community. Mike touched on all the other things that you can do, the RE lessons, the assemblies, clubs, after school clubs, all ways that we can be involved and supporting our school. I'm not going to say too much more on that, because if I do, Tim's going to have nothing left to say. So I'm going to hand over to Tim, and Tim can give us a little bit of an insight about how he works with the schools.
Gosh, well, I think I can remember once having as much energy as Mike did, and as Wil still has. My context is Ightham. It's a village parish, as it's 2,200 residents. It's a comfortable area. If you look on the indices of deprivation, we are 12,027th out of 12,382. So that does make us amongst one of the more wealthy parishes in the country. It has recently been given an outstanding school, and working with the school has been really important. I've loved it, and it's been lovely to have the time to do that and the opportunity. I think I would agree, relationships really have been key to it. Relationship, firstly with the head teacher, it's really, really important. Fortunately, mine is very sympathetic and can see the benefits of a good relationship with the local church as well, as part of the community of Ightham, and relationships where appropriate with staff, children, parents. I think one of the things that I've felt is that we need to be open. In other words, if the school wants to do something with you or with the church, then be as accommodating as possible. Show that we care, and make sure that that care is genuine. So in other words, it's not just something we try and put on, but it comes from the heart as well, and look for opportunities to go the extra mile. What do we do? Well, assembly, it's called assembly, not not this newfangled word, but we call it assembly. Well, that's what the school calls it. I do one about every 2 to 3 weeks with the whole school. Interaction, well, that's how it used to be. Now it's at the moment on Zoom, which is not very satisfactory. But interaction is the way. I'm fortunate I can play guitar and allegedly sing. And we sing songs and so I play guitar and sing songs of worship. But I think and I still can't get used to it, it's when you've finished singing a song, particularly on Zoom, they applaud, which, you know, for singing a Christian song of worship is, well, Doesn't feel quite right, but that's where they are. What else can I say? I don't do any teaching as such, but they use me and a number of the church members as human resources to talk about what it means for them to be a Christian. A number of our church members go in to help with children's reading. We have been going in and doing something called Open the Book, which has been a fantastic thing to do, and it requires somebody who's really committed to heading it up to go in. I haven't headed it up; we've had somebody doing it. But basically, if you've not done, if you've not come across Open the Book, that really has worked really well, because it means a small number of church members go in. We enact a scene from the Bible based on a Bible reading, and then we use Year 6 children to take part in the scenes. We rehearse with them just before the assembly takes place. We have school services in church, somewhat curtailed at the moment. The juniors tend to come rather than the whole school, but Christmas, Easter, Harvest, and Remembrance we've had as well with them. And whilst that was the norm when I had church schools in my parish, this has been really special to encourage that, and they've wanted to do it as well. Done school visits to church by various of the classes to show them around the church, not just the historical bits, but to show them the religious bits. During lockdown, I did guided tours for the classes via my iPhone and doing it virtually. So that's another way. It's not just been around me. A number of my, 3 of my church members are actually governors of the school, which I think is a pretty good percentage for a community school. It's not just because of their Christian input, they also have other gifts and abilities, and it's really important to use those gifts and abilities, and they make a tremendous contribution to the life of the school. I think I'll leave it at that. There's plenty. There's other stuff that we do as well, but I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much indeed, Tim and Will, for a really thoughtful and information-rich session. And I do know, actually, from knowing both of you and Nicholas too, that all 3 of you have been great examples of how clergy can engage with local community schools. So thank you for holding up the flag for that one. It's been really good. A few things have got into the chat function, I think, while people have been speaking. But now's an opportunity, after I think an hour of listening to people, for others to raise their hands if they would like to ask a question, and I'll look forward to hearing from you if you do, because otherwise it's just going to be me, and you don't want that. So I'm just going to, and now you can either raise a digital hand. I think you're going to have to raise a digital hand because I can't see everybody at the moment unless I get to full screen. Let me have a look. Okay. I think I can almost.
Michael
now
has his hand up, Bishop Simon.
All right, is that Michael Payne? No,
No, Michael Pretentry.
Oh, Michael. Hello, Michael.
Hello.
Nice to see you.
Sorry.
I haven't forgotten who Michael is. I actually helped to marry him off only a month or so ago. Nice to see you, Michael.
Thank you. I'm sorry I was a bit late arriving. It's really just a comment from my own experience. In my 20 years of ministry, I've always been in places with community schools. I've never actually had a church school in my parish, which is probably a little bit unusual. And particularly in my second parish in Langton Green, I worked there for 14 years with 3 different head teachers. And one head teacher was really keen to develop a relationship with the church. It was the last one. The first one was sort of quite accommodating, and the second one really was very difficult to get on with. So I noticed over my time there what a huge difference that made. So, and sometimes I think it's personalities, but if you can develop a good relationship with a head teacher, that's going to make a huge difference, because if I look back over those periods of time, my involvement with the school changed vastly depending on who the head was. So that is a real key thing, and you can't always get on with people. I think with the second head, it was a personality thing really. We just didn't get along, and it's just unfortunate, but that's how it is. But it does make a big difference.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that observation. Appreciate that.
Can I just pick up on that, actually?
Yeah, of course, Mike. Yeah,
that's really, really helpful, because I in the past have worked with schools, and there have been difficult moments, and we've been asked not to return, and then there's been a change of leadership, and 5 years later we're back in and best of friends, and there is no we always want to sort of do the rolling program, do it all year and do it all the years, and there is no problem with seasons. You know, we do things for a time, and then the next right thing comes up, or a break comes up, and that's all good. So yeah, I think that was a really helpful point, Michael.
thank you. Who else would like to come in to say something, or to ask a question of those who've been speaking? Waiting to see who cracks first. Let me work out. Thank you, Martin, for saving us. Martin, over to you.
Thank you, Bishop Simon. Where do I start? We've had access to community schools for the last 10 years, two community schools, and Open the Book, again, has been just a really helpful resource to be using. It gives ideas to some of our congregation as to quite how to stage some stories. I do find that narrating the stories I was in this afternoon is a really helpful way of creating good links with the children and the staff, and again, you know, that flows then into seasonal trips to church at times. The thing I really wanted to raise was around access to secondary schools. We have two secondary schools in our parish, one of which we've been doing what is known as church assembly for ever, it seems, about 30 years. So every term we're in to see every child. We meet one year group at a time, whereas the other school, which is an all-boys school, absolutely no contact beyond us renting the car park on Sunday morning, and it just feels chalk and cheese. And any thoughts about how we might crack the nut of better access to community secondary schools?
Thank you very much, Martin. Who'd like to have a go at answering that question?
Looks like Virginia wants to.
Yeah, and I had a feeling she didn't, and I thought she wouldn't like it if I suggested she did. No. So we'll wait to take Virginia.
Yeah, I was waiting to make another point, so I think we should take that question first.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Can I respond then, Bishop?
Oh yeah, Will and then Tim. Yeah, that's fine.
The first thing, Martin, I'd say is do not underestimate the power of prayer. We in our church, we have a prayer group, and we regularly take things to that prayer group. So if a school is being difficult to break into, definitely power of prayer to break into that. I would still recommend asking for a meeting with the head teacher and just having that chat with them, just even if it's just initially just introducing yourself, just kind of in that informal way of going, actually, I am your parish priest, we're in this community together, and just ask those questions of could we support you, and maybe even share what you're doing in the other school. The next inroad would be if any of your children in your community are within that school, get to know those young people and find out if they're aware of any needs, a Christian Union, any group or anything, and seeing if that is a way in to support them. But I think quite often schools will be very protective of their students, very suspicious, especially in this day and age, of religious groups. So it's about having patience and being in it for the long game to build up those relationships of trust.
Thanks, Will. Do you want to come in, Tim, and then Mike?
Mine's more a rather difficult anecdote because in my previous parish, we had a good relationship with the secondary school that was just down the road from the church. And then it became an academy. There was a change of leadership, change of head teacher, and the whole thing went round. And whereas we were able to go in, and there was a teacher I remember there who was ordained, and she was encouraged to go in to teach wearing her dog collar by the previous head. When it became, I'm not blaming academies for this, but when it became academy and there was a change of leadership, there was no access, none at all, despite all the attempt that we tried. And I guess, and I would agree with Wil that probably prayer is the only way when that sort of thing happens, and trying to build a relationship. But yeah, sorry, mine's a rather negative anecdote.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Tim. Mike, do you want to come in as well on that?
Yeah, there was two things. Three things. One, yes, prayer, absolutely. I think that, yeah, you said it. The other thing was the most wonderful schools outreach thing I ever saw came from the students at my old school, actually, Tunbridge Wells Boys Grammar, which was a rubbish place to be a Christian. And one of the young guys there, he just sort of caught a passion and caught a fire, and he set up a CEU, and inspired by, Jesus washing feet, he set up a football boot washing service in the playground, which was incredibly popular with all sort of 1,500 boys at the school. And from there, he developed the CU, ran Alpha, and then the locals, youth workers or ministers, it sort of varied through the couple of years, came and supported him, but it came from them. And I think finding the teenagers that wanted it, because they're stupid and they're teenagers, but they're passionate and they're capable, and with a bit of a sort of like a pat on the back, they're off. So going through the students, I think, would be a brilliant thing to do. The other thing is I often have conversations with secondary school groups, and they face shut doors because there's a sort of like, well, if we let you in, we have to let everybody in. And it's not that they have a problem with that necessarily, they just can't find a sort of Buddhist outreach group, or the imam is usually incredibly busy. But maybe there is scope. We live in difficult times, and conversation with other faith groups is not a bad thing. And for me, maybe controversially, I'm always sort of like, well, if they have a faith, then they believe in that, that they've already taken a step of belief. That's a good thing in the very atheistic world. So there's no problem facilitating a conversation for those young men to explore what's going on and what they believe.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you. I hope that's helped a little bit, Martin. You're nodding your head, so it looks like it has done. Thank you. Virginia wants to come in, I think.
Yeah, it's really building on what's been said about that secondary context, and people have reflected it. I mean, lots of the relationship building is often through those things which aren't the traditional, as it were, the traditional aspects of what we do in our schools. In other words, collective worship, helping with the RE, doing church visits. It's around the other things that can be offered that are the sort of elements of service, the gaps in the clubs and the gaps in what the school is able to offer, and the offer to say, well, that's a gap we can fill, that's a place of service for us. So I think some of the best work I've seen in my work with the education team has been those sorts of things when I've visited and they've said, oh, it's great, the church come in and do this, and this, and the this, and this aren't the collective worship and RE, although I would say they were absolutely vital. And it is finding in that relationship and in that dialogue those things which you can offer, and which the school will sort of, as it were, almost snatch your hand off for, really.
Thank you, Virginia. Thank you. Anyone else like to come in with an observation or a question?
Yes, Bishop Simon.
Yeah.
I couldn't find a hand to put it up. So.
Oh, right. So we'll go for Nicholas and then we'll go for Michael. Yeah. Okay. Go on, Nicholas. Yeah.
Yeah, just following on really from Virginia. I mean, I think both Karen and I would never have we didn't plan any of this relationship. It's not, it wasn't part of Grand Master Plan. It came into being, and actually there's a lovely photograph of Archbishop Rowan in the school, because he came and visited the school. But I'm very fond of a quote of his, that mission is finding what God's doing and joining in. And I think that's what we've managed to do here. And I know is happening in lots of other parishes as well. So I agree, Virginia, it's not necessarily about the traditional bits, it's looking for the gaps, and God's God of the gaps, and that's often where we find him. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Thank you. Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Bishop Simon. Just a couple of observations for me. Like I think the other Michael, I've got a parish with only community schools here too. But what I would say is that people in the community in schools, whatever we might think of ourselves as churches and as religious groups, people in community schools really regard churches as vital to the life of the community. And I think we sometimes do ourselves a disservice when perhaps we don't always see ourselves as that as much as we might. And working with community schools, really using the community word as much as the...
Oh, we just lost you, Michael, actually. You've just gone. If you could just... yeah. Try speaking again. I wasn't trying to shut you up, I promise. But you've come back in. You've come back in now. Okay.
Right, okay, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm up on a hill here and I often lose the connection. Yeah, I was just saying that the schools regard churches as important in the community. And I think if we can work with schools on a community level, that's as important as the educational one. For example, we have a food and a clothes bank at the school here, at the church here, which parents could donate to support some of the more economically deprived parts of this community that school serves. And we're looking at things where we can work together on community things, and that then starts surprising conversations about other things that we can do together. And then you find out, as someone else I think mentioned, that they're also often really keen to have us in to talk about key points in the Christian year, because they see us quite rightly as experts in our field, and they often feel that they have no expertise in religious matters, and that we might find if you have a relationship first, they then really want you in to talk about religious stuff.
Thank you very much indeed, Michael, for that observation. Anyone else want to come in? We're nearly at an end. I think we've got time for one more, if there is one more person who's kind of hovering over whether they want to say anything or not. And it's Kim, I think, who got in there first. So Kim, over to you.
It came up just now about God in the gaps. So I thought it might be relevant to mention about a new strand of ministry in schools, which I've been involved in the last couple of years. So like others, I love doing collective worship and contributing to religious studies and being involved in other ways. But one initiative that we set up has been Space to Breathe, where we offer reflective activities for teachers, and where we do this on a half-termly basis. We're currently doing it in our church school in Cudham, and where any member of staff can come along from about 7:45 in the morning and engage in grown-up craft activities, but where we offer also light breakfast refreshments. And there's time for fellowship and to share any prayer requests, and maybe put a prayer card in a prayer jar. then we can take it away and pray for the staff. And then also there's a gifting for teachers, but it's just a way of allowing the staff to come and be together and have that important space to just reflect and share with one another in that precious moment before the beginning of a busy school day.
Thank you very much, Kim. I think that's a good place to end, actually, thinking about the needs of teachers within our schools. So appreciate that. And just want to thank all the speakers today for all that they've contributed to this session and all they're doing elsewhere, and the rest of you too, because I know that's true of those who haven't been speaking here today. And I want to thank our Diocesan Board of Education as well, John Constanti, who's here, Director of Education, and Virginia herself, who spoke a bit earlier, who's the Deputy Director, who are available and always willing to serve and to help you in your ministry to schools, because there's a huge amount of knowledge and experience there that they can share, and which they're always very willing to do. I mean, there are a huge number of people connected to the schools in your parish, which means that actually once you build relationships with the school, you've done so with a key local component of community. It's hard to think of a more important local stakeholder than the local school. So thank you so much to the speakers. I reckon they probably sparked lots of ideas and initiative. And if more than anything else I think I've taken away from this, doesn't surprise me, but it really helps to reinforce it, the sheer value of human relationships with other people, that when you build relationships, it just changes the parameters and it changes the possibilities. It opens doors, it deepens trust and loyalty, and only good things come from good relationships in my experience. So thank you very much indeed for your time. I think we're pretty much bang on 5 o'clock. You're busy people, you're probably going on to your 18th Zoom of the day. So I will say goodbye to you now, and thank you very much for the ministries that you're conducting, which are deeply appreciated, and praying that God's Spirit would inspire those in the months ahead. Thank you very much indeed, everybody. Thank you.